Hey, how's it going? Wanted to come on here and do a video on a lot of the time over the why am I nervous? This is a live video. Why am I nervous? Anywho, let's start off by talking about the elephant in the room. Why do I have these flowers on my head? Well, I'm not a hippie, but I did a video shoot earlier for something exciting and amazing that's going to be happening soon. So, hence the flowers. Anywho, hi, Mary sisters. Okay, now I'm feeling better because y'all are joining the video. Y'all making me feel less nervous. I'm like, why am I nervous? Hi, Deidre, Monica. Awesome. I'm excited. That means you guys are interested because, like I said in the title, it's all about sharing whether or not you should self-publish your book or go through a traditional publisher. Now, I've been blessed to be able to do both for my 6 paperback books, 3 of them novels, 3 of them nonfiction. For the novels, I had them traditionally published through a New York publishing house in which I received 5-figure book deals for the 3 novels. For the 3 nonfiction books, I self-publish and have them published through my publishing company. Because when you self-publish, you create an LLC, you have your own publishing company, and your book is your product. So I've done both, and I'm excited because I want to share with you today whether or not, I guess by the end of what we talk about, you'll have a better idea, clearer idea of whether or not you should self-publish or go through a traditional publisher. I've been a published author now for about 13 years, a little more than that, I think 13, 14 years, praise God. And I am going to share with you. Now, this is stuff that people charge for, but I'm led to share with you today free tips on the difference between self-publishing, going through a traditional publisher, so that by the end of what I talk about, you'll have an idea of which route you want to take. Now, a little bit about my story. After consulting with different people in the industry, after reading, I highly recommend the book called The Self-Publishing Manual by Dan Poynter, because he actually outlines how to publish your book, self-publish it, and he has a calendar in there, because when you self-publish, basically you're the person that finances the whole project from start to finish. You hire people to get things done, whether it's your professional editor, don't get, Ray Pookie them, or somebody that got a degree, just because they got a degree in English. I have a degree in English, and I still had to have 2 editors at some points, and still book came out, still saw 1 or 2 typos. So you want to get someone that is professional, and you want to have someone that's going to design your book cover. You also get someone that helps with the interior layout. I remember for my first book that I initially self-published, as I was going through the steps and I was working with the book cover designer, I didn't know that I also had to have an interior layout designer. Like, I thought it was just the book cover, and that's it. But she was like, oh no, you gotta have an interior layout designer too, and that actually costs the same amount as a cover. So you want to account for all the expenses up front, because like I said, when you self-publish, you're paying for everything. You're financing everything, whether you do it through getting the funds from friends and family, a GoFundMe account, or if you're using a credit card. I use a credit card. This was back in the day when they were giving out those blank checks like water, passing them out. So I stepped out on faith and used credit to start my publishing business. Do I recommend that for everybody? Not necessarily, because you want to make sure as you get, this is the only way I would recommend it. As you receive revenue from it, make sure you're paying it off. Because sometimes you're tempted, how they always say, put the money towards your business when you get money. And that's what I did. I put the money towards my business. I traveled a lot. I attended a lot of women's expos, different cities and states. It was all self-funded. So I would recommend, if you decide to use any type of credit, make sure you have a plan to pay it off, because I ended up paying it off years later, and you don't want to do that. You don't want to, put that off. You want to pay that off up front. So, but know this, when you self-publish, it's a business. So you treat it like a business, and your product is your book. So that's why I recommend that book called The Self-Publishing Manual by Dan Poynter. Now, self-publishing versus going through a traditional publisher. I originally self-published after talking to people in the industry. Pam Perry was my book coach, my publicist. I met her because once I decided to obey God, God put it on my heart to write a book. And then once I decided to obey God, I set out on a journey of seeking out information of how to do it. God tells you to do something, you're like, okay, how am I going to do this? So back in the day, we really didn't have much Googling and all that stuff. See, y'all young people, y'all are spoiled because now everything's at your fingertips. You can just Google. Back then, we had to go to libraries. We had to look in newspapers. So I found a writers workshop called American Christian Writers. There was a Detroit chapter because I'm from Detroit. Whoop, whoop. And there's a Detroit chapter. So I'm like, this looks interesting. So I attended that meeting, and that's where I met Pam Perry. She was over the Detroit chapter of American Christian Writers. Now, I didn't know that she also was a publicist, someone that helps promote writers by getting them in different mediums, such as whether it's news, magazines, TV interviews, radio interviews. That's what a publicist does. So I didn't know that. And when I met her, we were just chatting, and she kind of asked me about some things, and she asked me to write a piece. So I wrote the piece, gave it to her, and she had it put in like the Michigan, I think it was the Michigan front page, and it was like a big spread. I was like, whoa. So for me, that was like confirmation that this is someone that I should be listening to and working with. So God is faithful in that I started working with Pam Perry, and she was the one. She initially had talked about self-publishing, and then I also talked to other authors. You want to talk to other authors. There's a saying, you either learn by mistakes or mentors. I can't stress this enough because so many people want to go out on their own and do things they've never done before and just be like, I'm just going to do it myself. And if people have paved the way and already done it and been successful at it, then it's okay to reach out to someone and ask them questions on how they did it because that keeps you from making costly mistakes. I have an example where I initially self-published my first novel, He's Fine But Is He Saved? It was like a bestseller within 2 years. It had sold over 12,000 copies, which was unheard of for a book. I didn't even know. I just knew that I kept getting all these orders, and I was just a little frazzled because I had never, run a business like this before. I didn't know what I was doing, but actually I was doing okay because I had experience in collections. So like people would try to order more books, and then I would see they have an outstanding invoice, and I'm like, wait a minute, you didn't pay for the last shipment of books, so you gotta cover that invoice first. So I was the collections department, customer service department, marketing, promotions, and then Pam Perry helped out with that, but you still hire the person, so you still have to get help there. So where was that? So I was talking about self-publishing, running it like a business. Oh, mentorship. So I'll give an example. There was a young lady who went to my church, and I didn't know she was writing a book. Now, like I said, mind you, my book had come out. It's very successful. People knew about it. Now, this young lady, we would fellowship at different outings and things like that with church friends and things like that. And isn't it interesting how, like, you could go to church with someone for years and not know what they're doing, not know their aspirations. You just eating food and talking about the Bible, it's like, okay, there's some other things to talk about. So I didn't know that she was writing a book. And I found out later from someone else that she had self-published, but then I found out she had printed 10,000 copies of her first book. So when I found that out, y'all, I was like, crickets, like, just like this. Because I'm like, you don't do that. You don't do that. I know we want to say, oh, we'll sell 1 million copies, yada, yada, yada. We have, you know, all this high hopes, which is great to have high hopes, but you want to know how to do it the way the industry dictates it, so you don't take all the risks and end up paying so much and spending so much money, and you haven't even tested the market. You don't even know if people want your book. You have to test the market first. So you don't even know that. So you have to test the market, and I recommend that you start out with 1,000 copies. Now, this was from back in the day. When I initially self-published my first book, it actually was back in the day when it was through a book manufacturer. There was no print on demand where you can just print. Nowadays, like if you go through Amazon's Create Space or another printing company, you could literally just print what you need. Like you could start off with 50 books and have your first book signing, test the market that way, and then as you get more demand, you can order more books along the way. Now, back in the day when I originally self-published, there was no print on demand. So I had to go through an old school book manufacturer, and the minimum order quantity was 1,000. So I ordered 1,000 books. So from that 1,000, I was able to test the market, get them put. I started out locally. I had them put in bookstores such as God's World here in Detroit, and there are some other bookstores here in Detroit. And then I branched out and received distributor deals with like the mom and pop bookstores that handle different bookstores across the country. And then ultimately a big national distributor that put my books in like then Borders and Barnes and Noble, Family Christian bookstores. And that's when it went nationwide as a self-published book. Now, normally that's unheard of because a lot of times when you self-publish, the quality isn't that great. When, like, you know, if you ever get somebody's book and you're like, oh, you're happy for them, but you're looking at it like, oh, what is, you know, like the cover look crazy. Like, so that's why I say you want to go to, and actually the Lord had me do this. The Lord, before my book came out, he was like, Kim, go to a bookstore and I want you to see your book on the shelves of book with other books before I even written mine. So I went to Borders and I just looked and I saw the books that were there, and I imagined my book being there. And that way, as I was having the book cover created, I saw the required quality that was necessary. And this, I didn't even know this. God is so good the way he does it. He'll tell you to do something, and oftentimes he won't tell you the why. The why will come later. So I just obeyed God. I imagined I saw my book there on the shelf. But then as I was working on a book cover, I was like, if I want my book on the shelf with those other books, I got to have the quality to be at least as good as theirs. So I did something a little different, and I had a photo shoot for my first novel. I actually had real people. We did an all-day photo shoot with the 3 characters from He's Fine But Is He Saved. I gave them their costumes, and they dressed up like the characters. They did an awesome job, and it was an awesome all-day affair. And then the book cover designer used those images to put the first book together. So yeah, it's on Amazon if you want to peek at it, the first book. I was looking for it. I don't have it quickly at my fingertips, but yeah, that was for He's Fine But Is He Saved. Now, do I recommend you have a photo shoot and all that? No, you don't have to do that now. I mean, now with technology, you can have someone design your cover. And I mean, I've had some covers like my book, Faith in Broken Places, Understanding God's Plan in the Midst of Pain, the book that was inspired by my car accident where I broke my leg in 3 places. That one, I just found a stock photo image, a royalty-free stock photo image. You want to get an image that's royalty-free because you don't want to be sued later for somebody that's saying you don't have permission to use my image for your book cover. So there's, you can go somewhere like dreamstime.com, and there's some other places you can Google where you can get royalty, just put in royalty-free images. Now, some of them, they may charge you. You may have to purchase credits to buy so many images. And then when you do your book, you're going to look at more than one cover, you know. And then there are some ways you can also do it as well where it's very affordable. So nowadays, doing a book cover is very, very affordable. So, so you definitely want to consider that. So that's an example. I said all that to say the young lady, when I found out she printed 10,000 books for her first print run. Now, you want to lead up to 10,000 books for a print run. You don't want to have your first print run be 10,000 books because, like I said, you haven't tested the market. You don't know if there's a demand for the book. You don't know if people are going to like the book. The average book sells 2,000 copies in its lifetime and about 500 to friends and family. And a lot of books don't even go beyond friends and family. So you want to test the market out to see if people want your book. I had to lead up. I started out, my first copy was 1,000, and then I led up to, I did have a 10,000 print run as the demand got so high for more books, more books, more books, because of course, the more books you have printed, the lower the cost per book. And then with things like Amazon, CreateSpace, if you want to do print on demand where you can have a lower quantity printed, you can actually do that. And depending on the number of pages, like if you have a 150-page book or 100, I always say for nonfiction, shoot for at least 120 pages. I just say give people value. I'm not for cutting corners in any way. Some people like to have these books 70 pages and charge you $20. No. Give them the value they want, the value they need, or at least charge what the market dictates based on the number of pages and things like that. So let's say you have a 120 or 150-page book. You can go on Amazon's CreateSpace, where that's a very affordable way to self-publish. And then you basically pay them per book. Like let's say they may charge you $3 per book, $3 for shipping. And then that way, when you sell the book, if you decide to sell it for $10, $15, that's how you make your money, because you buy the books in advance, the inventory, and then you sell the books, whether you're doing like a speaking engagement or you're selling them from your website. And then the book can also be on Amazon through CreateSpace. And so each time a person purchases the book, you get paid a royalty from each one. So that's a way there as well. Now, as it pertains to self-publishing versus going through a traditional publisher, I'm someone who initially self-published, and then so that way I was able to test the market. I saw there was a demand for my book. It was a Christian fiction, and this was when Christian fiction genre was not as popular as it is today. So it was like a budding genre, and there was a demand for it. So I was able to test the market and prove the demand, because publishers, especially the major ones, they take the risk. When they take on your book, they're taking the risk. They're saying, I will pay you in advance in most cases, because sometimes if you're new and if it's your first book and if you haven't sold any, and if you just have a manuscript, you may get offered either a low advance of $500 to $1,500 or no advance. And then because what they're doing is they're taking on the expense of publishing your book. They're taking the risk. They're taking the risk on the front end to get paid, hopefully on the back end. But when you self-publish, you take the risk on the front end by paying for yourself, but you get paid more money on the back end because you get to keep more of the profit. Whereas if you go through a traditional publisher, they take the risk, they pay more on the front end, and then they take more of the profit on the back end. So I like the fact that the way I did it, I went through I self-published initially, proved the market, sold so many copies. So that way I was able to have leverage by the time I was talking to publishers. I was able to come to the table with results and say, so far the book sold 12,000 copies in a couple years, Black Expressions bestseller, yada, yada, yada. And so I'm not someone just off, I wasn't someone just off the street saying, here's my book, take a risk on something that you don't know how it's going to do. No, I'm saying, here are the results, here how it's done. So that way I was able to command a 5-figure advance as a first-time author because I had already tested the market, if that makes sense. So that's a pro, that's an advantage. Now, another advantage to self-publishing is you learn the process along the way. It teaches you how to self-publish as you're learning different things. As you're not just writing your book, you're not just having it edited, you're doing the book cover design, getting the ISBN number, the barcode, all the different things, and you're learning the process. You're learning the lingo, you're learning the industry, which is so important because if you go through a traditional publisher, if you are going in as an author who has never published a book, then there are some things they can withhold information from you, not tell you certain things. I remember one company wanted to sign me on for my first book, and they wanted to give me a very low advance, and then they wouldn't disclose how many copies they were going to print up front. So because I self-published initially, I knew the importance of knowing that number. You know, and so I ended up going with, I was blessed to, as I was networking, because that's something else you want to do. I networked, I went to different writers' conference. I gave away a lot of books for free to influencers in the industry. I would go to conferences. I gave books to instructors of different writers' conferences, different people I would meet. You have to sow a seed first before you reap a harvest. I didn't just wake up one day, write a book, now I'm a bestseller. No, before I even wrote the book, I attended other people's book signings. I supported their books. I gave away free books. All that is seed time harvest. So I sowed seed. So I was just giving away books, wasn't even thinking about it until I attended a writers conference in the Greater Philadelphia Writers Conference, attended a fiction writers workshop. Y'all, I pretty much fell asleep in the workshop. Sitting close front, I know the teacher probably saw me sleep. And by the end of the thing, I had the nerve to go up there and talk to the man and give him my book. I know he was like, was this the girl that was sleeping in the class? But I just believe God for favor. I'm like, I got to get this man my book, but talk to him. And lo and behold, he ended up reading the book on the plane on his way home, reaching out to me. He said he loved the book. He gave me the names of 5 top agents. Come to find out, he was a board member of American Christian Writers National. Gave me the names of 5 top agents, told me he would query them and let them know up front that I would be contacting them. And so he basically endorsed me as a budding author. So that way I was able to reach out to them and they would reach back. Because sometimes if you're reaching out to an agent, they don't know who you are, they may not respond. But because he did that, they responded to me. And out of the 5, there was one that I went with, one that was very interested. And she's the one that got me the book deal. It was within BET Books, which was an imprint of Harlequin Books. Harlequin had an inspirational line at the time. And so that was my first New York publishing book deal. 5-figure deal. It was for 2 books. It was for the He's Fine But Is He Saved, and the sequel, He's Saved But Is He For Real? So God is faithful, and I guess I'm a little biased because that was the route I took. I recommend self-publishing first, prove the market, to be able to leverage yourself so that if you decide to go with a book deal, because nowadays you have a platform anyway on social media. So nowadays, a lot of people don't even go with a publisher. But if you decide to go with a publisher, when you self-publish, you test the market first and you're able to leverage yourself as you market yourself, and you're able to command a nice advance. Because the thing is, a lot of authors, and what a lot of authors don't tell you, is many of them pretty much live off advances. And oftentimes, if you're offered, like I have an author mentor, she received a 6-figure book deal. This was back in the day. The publishing industry has changed. They're not giving those out like they were giving them out before, because Everything's changed through Amazon, through print on demand, everything like that. But at the time, she had a 6-figure book deal. And with an advance, you are not required to pay that money back. Because what the traditional publisher is doing, they're taking the risk, and they're believing that for every that as they give you the advance, basically it's an advance against future earnings. Kind of like in the music industry, you know, if you get a record deal, they give you so much up front, but then you have to make it back. In the book world, you have to make it back in book sales. So you get the money back in the book sales. So let's say, okay, so the average publisher, the average traditional publisher, they figure for every dollar they give you in advance, they figure that equals a book sold. So for my first book deal, it was like $10,000. So that means they expected me to at least sell 10,000 books. And so they advanced me that money, and then you as an author will never have to see it back. You just, it's just advanced to you. Now, what a lot of authors do, especially like the main authors, I don't know if you noticed that sometimes you see the same few authors on bookshelves over and over again. Well, they're basically getting multiple book deals, you know, 3 to 5 book deals, and it could be like a 6-figure, 3 to 5 book deal. So they're basically living off the advances. You know, and some people say things like, well, you know, because people don't know the industry, they think if you have a book and you sell all these hundreds of thousands, you just must be rich. But with any business, there are more expenses than just the product. You know, you have marketing costs, which is probably the biggest expense, because you're going to be networking, marketing. You're going to, back in the day, I did a lot of e-blasts when it wasn't as popular and people were actually opening emails. I did interviews. Like I said, Pam Perry had to pay her retainer, so did a lot of media interviews, TV interviews, and you're also building relationships. You know, I thank God some of the media personalities that I interviewed with, I'm actually still cool with today. So God is good. I'm excited about that, because I'm a relationship person. I love doing business based on relationship. I don't like doing business where it's just cold and you don't really know the person. I like to do it where it's like beneficial for both, like a win-win, and then you still kind of cool with each other. That's just my preference. So yeah, so when you self-publish, like I said, a lot of authors are living off the advance, and they keep chugging out. Like, for example, like a Kimberly Lawson Roby, she got that Curtis Black character in them series. So every time she writing a novel, Curtis Black is showing up because people love that Curtis Black. And she's selling books. She's selling books over and over to the same audience that loves that Reverend Curtis Black. And she's basically living off royalties. So she's going on the book tours. They're putting her on the tours. Now, each publisher is different. Some publishers pay for you to go on tour. Some publishers reimburse you after you pay. Some publishers don't pay. My first publisher, you know, whatever, if you go with a publisher, your first book deal, you have to prove yourself as an author. A lot of times they're not willing to pay. They're not willing to put a big budget in marketing, especially if you're not already a celebrity or if you're not a politician. You have to prove yourself with the publishing house first before they invest any more money in you. So a lot of times, and this is some good wisdom, you want to take part of your advance, a percentage of it, whether it's 20, 25%, and put that thing in marketing costs. So you don't want to get your advance and just blow it. You want to set aside a percentage and put towards marketing costs of your book. So I definitely suggest that. All right, so I just peeking at, I having a, hi, Bobby, yay, hey, how you doing? Pastor Petaway, all right, hey Raymond, hey Apostle, yes, Lorna, yes, you know what, you gonna start tomorrow. I'm about to start tomorrow. You know I love you, Lorna. I know you've had it in your belly for a minute, time to get it out. No excuses. It's 2018. No more excuses. I have a to-do list. If I had it near me, I would show you. This was on my to-do list. I was supposed to do this video at 3 o'clock because I did the video earlier. It didn't happen. You see how late it is? It is late. But you know what? I'm still doing it today because it was written down. Write down what you plan to do. Have a to-do list. When you do your to-do list, when you write it down, it's like it's already done. You automatically start going in the direction of what you write down. So don't just, oh, haphazard, I'm going to write a book one day. No, put it in your to-do list, just like you write if you're going to the grocery store, just like you write if you're going, just like you go to work. But see, the thing is, we go to work every day because you see an immediate reward. You know there's an immediate reward. But when you do your book, it's not an immediate reward, but it's more like a long-standing, long-term purpose reward. You know, your rewards in heaven, like God talks about. You may not see it up front, but it's still important nonetheless, and it still deserves priority. It still deserves attention, and you're not doing it every day yet. It's not a habit yet. So if something isn't a habit yet, you have to write it down so it can become a habit. So definitely schedule out, like I did video before, schedule out time to write your book. A book doesn't write itself. You have to schedule the time, whether it's a half hour a day, whether it's Saturdays from noon to 5, especially all my single people. Where my single people at? Woohoo! You have time. You have time to write, you know, especially if you don't have kids. Now, if you have kids, you may have to work around your kids' schedule. You may have to get up earlier than they get up, you know, because they're sleeping or they're playing or they have their social life, but you still have to schedule that time and do what works for you. And you have to write it down in your to-do list. So that's why I do it in love. I mess with people because the statistics show that 80% of Americans have a book in them, but only about 10% actually write it. And that shouldn't be. You don't want to always be the student. At some point, you have to execute. And I'm guilty of that. I love learning. I love taking in information. But y'all, sometimes we use it as a crutch to not start. Sometimes we feel like, I'm not ready yet. I need some more information. I got to get this. I got to get that. And we use it as an excuse not to write. Especially as writers, all we have to do is write. I remember this publisher, she used to go to my church, and I remember when she had, I told her about my book. Now, I'm the kind of person, if I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. It may not be now, it may not be this month, it may not be this year, but it's going to be done. And I told her, she was a publisher with a major publishing house. She had an imprint. And I told her about my book, and this is before I had written it. And this was, I was leaving morning prayer for my church. She was coming out too. And she was like, all right, write the book. And I sensed the lack of belief in her words. Like, she said it like, yeah, whatever, write it and we'll see. And when she did that, I was thinking to myself, I told her I was going to write it. But now that I've been in this a minute and I've been doing it, like I said, about 13 years or so, I see what she means. She wasn't doing it she wasn't saying anything personally toward me. She was doing it based on the number of people that tell her, I'm writing a book, I'm doing this. How many times we tell people, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, and it doesn't get done. And with writing, all it takes is you showing up at the computer and typing and being consistent and getting it done. And once you get your first book done, it gets easier after that. So definitely want to do it. There's no more excuses, and don't worry about it being perfect. Your first book is not going to be perfect the first time. The devil told me when I wrote my first book, after it was done, the devil said, that is not a book. He was I was like, what? It's not a book. I had to let people read the first chapter and just to make sure it's a book, because he tried to create that doubt. I had written 300 something pages, poured out hours and hours and hours typing, developing characters and all that stuff for the devil at the end to tell me I don't have a book. Devil is a liar. So it's just a matter of starting. You know, there's a saying that sometimes the hardest thing to do is to start. And it's just, you know, believing in yourself, believing in the God-given vision in your heart. And you can say, I'm going to start today. Or like Lauren said, I'm starting tomorrow. So I just want to challenge you, take another step. You starting tomorrow? What time? What time you gonna write? What time you gonna show up to write? And then stick to it. And when you write the time down, it's okay if you're late. It's okay if you don't get it right at that time, but you're closer to getting it done by writing it down than if you hadn't written it down. So, amen. All right, so now what I'm going to do is go, oh boy, time is flying. On my website, christianbookcoach.com, because I am a book coach, I have on there, I actually created the website because so many people would come up to me and talk about how they're writing a book, and people would have the same questions. That's another reason it's important to have a mentor, because you hear the same questions over and over and over again. And not only that, you know the journey. You know what someone's highs are going to be, what their lows are going to be, what their joys are going to be, what their sorrows are going to be. You know it because you've already been through it. And so when you have a mentor, you are able to navigate the person so that they don't make the same mistakes that you made. A lot of the stuff I'm sharing with you today were mistakes that I made. So that's why I'm able to now share them with you so you don't make those same mistakes. So on christianbookcoach.com, it says home, about Kim Brooks. Let me refresh. I have a section called free tips for aspiring authors. And so I have things like what to do if you have writer's block. I've written my book, Now What? What does it mean to self-publish? What does it mean to pursue a publisher? Do you recommend self-publishing or going through a publisher? What's the cost? Why don't I just go with the publisher? If it costs money, why don't I just have the publisher do it? So I want to encourage you definitely to check out the page as it breaks it down even further from what I talked about. But a lot of what I talked about is covered. So again, it's christianbookcoach.com, and you click on where it says free tips for aspiring authors. Like I said, I recommend initially self-publishing, and then if you really want to do it with a low risk way as far as financially funding it, you can actually do it. I would suggest publishing an ebook first. You know, you can publish an ebook first, test the market that way, or you can do a physical paperback book and pre-sale the book. And as you pre-sell the book, you can use the pre-sale income to cover, you can pre-sell the ebook, use the pre-sale income to cover expenses, whether it's for the book cover and things like that. Now, just like the word says, count up the costs before you publish, before you spend a dime. You want to budget out the cost that it would take to publish. So like I tell people, you have two budgets when you write your book, and if you decide to self-publish. There's your self-publishing budget for producing the book. That's going to include the cover, getting your ISBN number, your barcode, interior design. You know, that's the production side. Now, the awesome thing with the production side, that's just a one-time cost that you're never going to have to pay for again. So you budget all that out. And then the other cost is your marketing expenses, how you're going to market the book, because writing the book is the easiest part. It's easy. I know people are like, oh, the hardest part is to write it. No, it's easy. Once you're done and once you breathe like, God, we wrote the book, then you realize, okay, and now I got to tell people about it. So you have to market the book, and your first sales are going to come from friends and family. And when I say friends and family, I'm talking true friends and family. I suggest having a big party, a big, nice book signing. I like to do events with my book signings where it's like a ballroom dancing and a concert. And I mean, you can even have some local talent or friends that you know are talented and have them perform for your book signing and make it like a big event. And those are going to be your initial sales, and that's going to be the initial buzz. And then you can mention it on social media. However, there is a way to do it on social media, because sometimes people come out with the book and they just like, buy my book, and then people are like, oh my goodness. I may have to do a session on that as well, because you don't want to bombard people where it seems like you're spamming them on social media, and there's a way to do it. And then when you're selling your book, you want to stress the benefits of it and let people know what they're going to get out of reading it. people want to know the value they're going to get out of reading it, more so than just buy my book because it's mine and help me out. You know, it's like, okay, no, you wrote the book for the other person. It's the ultimate, like I say, it's the ultimate form of service. It's the ultimate form of evangelism, because you're sharing what God put in your heart for the purpose of helping other people. So yeah. So as far as like I said, the pros and cons, the main pro of self-publishing, another big thing is you maintain the control of your book as far as how it's promoted, how the cover looks. But you know what? Publishers work with you. You know, it's not like they do ask your input, especially if it's a genre that they're not familiar with. My latest book, She That Findeth, which is like a romantic comedy spin-off of He That Findeth a Wife, that was published with Atria Books, a division of Simon & Schuster. And I was their first urban inspirational book, and so they asked me for a lot of input because they weren't familiar with the genre. So I was able to like have more creative control because of that. So I don't want you to be scared. You know, a lot of people are like, control, you know how we be like, somebody taking we don't want to lose control. But it's okay. Like I said, if you're offered a book deal, just know the pros and cons. Of course, the main pro with a book deal is that you get that upfront advance. But then you don't want to just rely on the advance, because as the author, you're still expected to market and promote the book, and you still have to prove yourself to the publisher and things like that. So, yeah, let me see what I put on this page. What else did I put? We talked about that. Well, I think I covered pretty much. Yeah, I pretty much covered a lot as far as the pros and cons. The main pro too for self-publishing is you make the most profit if it's a profitable book. If you self-publish, you maintain 100% of the profit if you sell it in person. If you go through a distributor, you may be able to maintain like 40 to 60%. If you go through Amazon and you charge it in between 99 cents and I think it's $9.99, they give you 70%. Whereas if you go through a publisher, y'all gonna be like, what? If you go through a publisher, the average author gets 7 to 10% per book sold, which averages out to about $1 a book. So the only way you know an author is like $1 million author is literally if they sold 1 million books. Because when you go through a publisher, you only get $1 a book. So see, the thing is, you can sell less in volume as a self-published author. You can sell 40, 50,000 books and get more money because you're getting more profit versus going with a publisher having to sell 50,000, 100,000, you know, just to see a dent. So that's another big advantage to self-publishing. But that's the thing, you just have to be willing to take the risk up front, pay the cost up front, test the market up front. And then if it's a success, you keep most of the profit, and then you can decide if you want to eventually go with a publisher or if you want to continue to self-publish. I decided to go with a publisher because I felt like the business of running a publishing company was starting to take a toll on my ability to write. And I'm a writer. You know, I'm a writer who speaks. Some people are speakers who write. I'm a writer who speaks. I write first. And I didn't want to take away that time that I could be putting into my book, you know. So that's why I decided to go with a publisher. But then I found out you still have to put in equal amount of work if you go with a publisher, because there's a myth. People think you go with a publisher, the publisher's going to do everything. They're not going to do, in most cases, they may not do anything. They may give you a few cover copies to kind of share and let people know coming soon, or they may give you, they're supposed to give you at least 10% of the first print run for you to give away for free as promotional, you know how they do the advanced copies and things like that. They have, I want to share with you an industry conference, because every industry has a major conference. And so for books, it's the Book Expo America. It's around every June in New York. I would definitely suggest you attend that. Even if your book isn't out yet, definitely attend that. When I went, I felt like it was Christmas, y'all. It was so many books. It was just a big old, it was beautiful. All these books, and people were there giving out their books for free because they're promoting their books in advance. So I would definitely suggest that you go to the Book Expo America. And then they have a genre-specific one for Christians called the Independent Christian Retail Show, ICRS. So if you Google ICRS, Independent Christian Retail Show 2018, you can see the information for that as well. Now, I really like them too because they're a lot smaller. Book Expo America is for all genres, but the Christian one is just for Christians, so it's a lot smaller. And they have a lot of media there doing interviews. In most cases, you can get on-the-spot interviews with different people because they fly people in just for the purpose of scheduling a whole bunch of interviews at one time with different authors in one place. So I would suggest those for 2 industry conferences to attend. And like I said, for more information about free tips regarding your book, an upcoming book, and pros and cons of self-publishing, check out christianbookcoach.com and click on free tips for aspiring authors. I also have one-on-one coaching sessions that I offer as well through the site. And then I'm also going to be doing a webinar soon. So it's going to be within the next few weeks. So sign up for my emails on christianbookcoach.com. That way you will be notified when the webinar is coming up. The webinar is going to talk about the winning formula for creating a bestseller, because y'all probably know a lot of people that have books out here, but they're just kind of sitting, or they only sold a couple hundred and they don't know how to, you know, get them to sell more. There's a formula. There's a formula for that. I have multiple books that have been on different bestsellers lists. My book, Is It a Sin to Masturbate? Know What the Bible Says, Revealed. That book was an Amazon bestseller. He's Fine, But Is He Saved? Was a Black Expressions bestseller. And He's Saved, But Is He For Real? And my book, the latest novel, She That Findeth, were Christian News Network bestsellers. So there are different lists, different bestseller lists. So, and I can share that with you as well on the webinar. All right, so I pray you were blessed tonight. Have a wonderful evening. Feel free to share this video. Let other people know, especially people that you know. Keep telling you, I'm writing a book, I'm writing a book, I'm writing a book. Share this with them or share it on your page. You never know who is writing a book. All right, have a blessed night. Be and stay encouraged. Peace.